Very good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome all the participants, speakers on behalf of Internal Audit Standards of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Uh, in the evening, we will go to the for the virtual CPD on standards internal audit, benchmark the quality. Today we have with us Harsh Mittalji, Vice Chairman of the Faridabad branch of the ICAI. So we would like to welcome Harsh Mittalji for opening remarks of today's BCM on standards on internal audit and the benchmark quality. So request Harsh Mittalji for opening remarks this important virtual CP meeting organized by Internal Audit Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. I welcome you, sir. Please, sir, for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vijay. Good evening to all of you. Guest speaker of
Sanjeev Suji, Chief Executive.
Max Life Insurance Company Limited, ICA Harsh Kumar Mittal, Vice Chairman of Faridabad branch. Welcome you all in today's VCM, organized by Internal Audit Standard Board of ICI and hosted by Faridabad branch of NIRC of ICI. I am very lucky. In absence of our branch chairman, CA Jitendra Chavlaji, I got the opportunity to welcome you all in today's VCM on standard on internal audit benchmark for quality. As you all are aware that in today's era, internal audit plays a very important role in any organization. But we professional doing internal audit without having following any standards. So today we will know how these standards plays an important role while we conduct internal audit. Very interesting topic. So I request the moderator, please start the VCM with our guest speaker. Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
all.
Thank you, Harshal for your opening remarks. Harshal is a very dynamic vice chairman of Faridabad branch of CI. So, for further, I would like to welcome CP Arora ji uh, for uh, their uh, to speak on the topic standards for internal audit and planning of the internal audit assignment. So, first of all, I would like to introduce CA Yukti Arora. CT is a process risk technology practice leader at Omnia Consulting Services LLC. She has experience of more than 2 decades of experience in the field of process and risk advisory. She is CA, CISA, DISA, has previously worked as a director of the risk advisory service at Big Four. She has worked extensively in manufacturing, consumer sector, automobile sector, e-commerce, and BPO, IT sector as well. She is a regular faculty with Digital Accounting and Assurance Board, Internal Audit Standard Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. She also regularly delivers lectures and trainings in the ISA and IIA Delhi chapter. So, on behalf of the Internal Audit Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I welcome you, CA Yukti Arora, for today's talk on the standards for internal audit, SIA 310, planning the internal audit assignment. So, welcome, ma'am, on this evening on the very important VCM on behalf of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for this warm introduction. And I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, your screen is visible. Yes.
Okay, just a second. Yes, so thank you, Faridabad branch and CA Institute, Internal Audit Standard Board, for organizing this session. I'm looking forward to share my learning and experience with all of you. So this standard of internal audit, SIA 310, is essentially a planning the internal audit assignment. So if you look at the standards which have been issued by CA Institute, they are standards which are giving a broad framework. Then they are providing inputs on putting the internal audit objectives and using the work, and then their engagement specific standards, and then there are certain general standards which are there. And if you look at the overall view of this entire thing, so they are two different standards. The SIA 220 is on conducting overall internal audit planning, which is very different than this SIA 310, which is planning the internal audit assignment. And today what we are going to discuss is SIA 310, which is planning the internal audit assignment. Standard 220 is a very broad standard. It talks on a broader level the overall internal audit planning. It covers a larger period of 1 year, but these internal audit assignments are subset of the overall internal audit plan and are generally smaller. They are mostly these are reviewed and approved by the internal audit head, but the standard 220, SIA 220, planning as per that, it is done and approved by a board of directors and audit committee. So we are going to discuss on the planning the internal audit assignment. But before I start, there are some important thoughts or questions which I have for all of you. Do you think that you can reach your goal unless and until you know exactly what your goal is? First step is to know your goal, know your objective. Can anybody reach that thing without knowing that? Obviously, the answer to it is no. For instance, if we are planning to go to Mumbai from Delhi, unless and until we know we have to reach Mumbai, can we reach anywhere? No, we can't reach anywhere. For instance, if we have to go and the timelines and the time of our meeting is after 4 hours, if we go by train, can we reach and meet the objective? No. So we have to understand that the requirement, we have to understand the objective, we have to understand the timelines. And to do this, the first and the foremost thing is to have a proper plan. Once you have understood, the first and the foremost thing is to have a plan. You have to first think in your mind of how to execute it, and then you can only execute it in an effective and efficient manner. So there are certain, let us look at some of these questions. Without knowing our audit objective, do you think that we can deliver as per our stakeholders' expectations? Without knowing that why this audit engagement has been selected as a part of overall internal audit plan, can we deliver? No. For instance, there could be a requirement, regulatory requirement, which could be upcoming, and therefore there would be a requirement to do a privacy audit, internal audit of a privacy. Or there could be certain reasons where the customers are requiring us to look at those details in finer and build the trust in the organization data protection. So that could be the reason. So unless and until we know the objective, we know the reason, we know the stakeholder expectations, we cannot deliver as per the thing. And to do this, it is extremely important to understand and plan. Second important question: can you think that without gathering knowledge or without understanding what the risk is or potential audit issue, can you audit effectively and deliver? Can you plan effectively and deliver? unless and until you know the objective, you know the purpose, you know the information or data or in details which are required for the purpose of knowing the risk, you cannot do an planning and you cannot do an audit in an efficient manner. Can we execute an audit engagement without knowing whom to execute? Who are our process owner? Who are the people who will have to write? From where we can get the information? What data we require? What is the source of that information? And why we require that type of unless and until we know all this and we plan for all this, our audit can never be effective and efficient. So it is extremely important that we should know all these types of things. Can we deliver effectively without adequate team? We have put a wonderful plan. We know everything. But if we do not have our team members, if we do not have right skill set, if we do not have the technical know-how to deliver it, can we deliver effectively? No. So it is essential that we plan for all these things. We know what is the resources which we will be requiring, what is the skill set which we will be requiring, with what will be the time which we will be requiring, and what will be the tools which we will be requiring. And unless we know it and plan for it, our audit will not at all be effective. So in a nutshell, what I want to say is, to deliver on a timely manner as per audit schedule, the first and the foremost thing is to have a plan. Unless and until if we have this plan, we will never be able to meet the requirements of our audit committee, of our board of directors, of various investors, stakeholders who are wanting us to do the audit and give an assurance or advice or recommendation. So planning is therefore one of the first and the foremost thing. Everything needs to be put in writing in a proper and efficient manner with a proper thought over process, so that we are able to meet that type of requirement. Things should be executed on paper first, and then it should go on the thing. In fact, 60 to 70% of the entire effort, if we spend on planning, I think, and putting the things in the right way, getting the right set of information, the audit will be much more efficient, much more effective. It will really add value and bring the result which is required from the engagement. So that's the importance of planning. And from all my experience, I can say that the better we plan, the better we know, and better we assess, and better we schedule the right team and the skill set, and have used right tools and technology, the better will be our delivery, and the better is always the delivery in such a case. So we are going to discuss, and that is exactly what this standard of internal audit talks about. This SIA 310, planning the internal audit assignment. It exactly speaks about this entire thing, and it is as any other all other standard. It has a brief setting or introduction, objectives, then it lays down requirement, and those requirement explanatory comments, and the date from which it is effective. So if you look at it, as I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of difference between the planning of overall internal audit plan, which is covered in SIA 220, and the SIA 310, which is internal audit assignment plan. They are, if you look at it, there are very, like when you put a yearly plan, generally it is on an yearly basis we prepare this plan. They could be various areas, like for example, they could, one of the audit area could be procurement, and then there would be sales and distribution, and then information technology. Within that, there would be various engagement. Like for instance, in the procurement, we can have an assignment one which is relating to vendor and vendor master data management. Second could be the material procurement. Third could be channel promotion and incentive. Fourth could be sales ordering and sales return. Fifth could be SAP ITGC, and the sixth could be data and cyber security. So there could be like this many things which would be part of this thing. And for each one of them, we have to prepare an internal audit assignment plan, which goes into the finer details, which goes into the details wherein we lay down that what the unit would be, what the stakeholders would be, what is the exact objective and the requirements of it is, what is the reporting timeline. This plan, the overall internal plan, could be broken down into various quarters, and the quarter wise details or sub would be as a part of this. The overall plan, as I mentioned, is approved by the internal or by the audit committee or by the board of directors. But this internal audit assignment plan is something which is approved by the chief audit executive, or the, in case you are using an outsourced third party, by the partner or the director who is overseeing or managing the overall engagement. And each one of these things has a very specific details of nature and extent and various types of work which is required to do. So there is a difference, and in the introduction of the standard, that's what is explained, that it's divided into two levels. One is at the overall level, the first one which is in SIA, covered in SIA 220, and the second one is SIA 310, which is what we are talking about. Now let us look at what are the objective, why we require, and what is the need for do the internal audit assignment planning. First of all, the first and the foremost, the basic objective of it is to understand what is expected, what is the overall reason why this has been included in the plan. To align your audit process, you align the entire effort of yours as per that overall expectations of it being included in the audit plan. To understand what is the reason, what is the stakeholder expectations from that thing. So therefore, the first and the foremost step for each one of us when we take an audit engagement is to know why we are doing, why it was included in the audit plan. What was the reason why the stakeholders, board of directors, audit committee, and the people, the executive committee, all of them said that this is so important and it should be included in the audit plan and subject to review. What are the risks? What is the sensitivity? What is the importance of the same for it to be included? So we need to understand that as a first and the foremost step. If we do this well, if we understand this well, I'm sure like the result would be there, because if we understand this, we'll put our effort and focus it on our the entire effort to achieve that objective. The second important objective of having a good planning is to have a very clear understanding of what is there in scope. For instance, if we have taken an area of vendor master management, we need to understand very clearly that it is what type of vendors, whether it is all the vendors across the business unit, across the group company, or is it only specific business unit or thing, whether it is for a particular type of or category of products or services, or whether it is complete like thing. So we need to understand very clearly the scope, the coverage, and based on that, we should devise and put a methodology so as to enable us to give a reasonable assurance on the audit which we are performing. Third important step is or the objective of having an internal audit plan is that we are able to allocate adequate time and resources. See, if we have this plan and we have to deliver in the quarter, there's an audit committee which is on the next quarter, which is in the month of January. So we have only 2 months to do the entire activities. Then we have to accordingly plan this, allocate, put the right set of resources, focus on the critical areas, start working backward so that we are able to present it with our in a right time and manner to the audit committee. And also it helps to align the resources not only of the auditor but also of the auditee, because they have to also provide the information, data, and be equally involved with us. So it helps us, this plan help us to communicate with the auditee that what is our expectations from them, what will be the time commitment for them, what types of details we would be asking, and what is the commitment in terms of closure of the engagement. So it helps us in doing the audit in an effective and efficient manner. Another important objective of this internal audit plan is to be very, very efficient, because see, time is essence, and time and the data and information which are flowing from various lakes, we can't be looking at everything because it's an ocean. If we are given an objective, if we know the scope and coverage, we have to focus on that and be more efficient and effective. And so that the value of that engagement is achieved by the organization and stakeholders. Also, this internal audit plan help us to very clearly comply with this applicable pronunciation of ICAI. And that's what is written in the standard only. So I've just said, so this is exactly what is written in the standard, which I have taken from this thing and put it in this slide. So now once we know the objective and we know this is so very important and critical, the next step for us is to understand what all is required for us to plan in an effective manner. And if you look at it, first and the foremost step is to have a clarity of how this entire process is going to go about. Gather the understanding about the business and the environment in which it is operating. What are the key drivers of the business? What are the internal and external factors affecting the business? Then have a discussion with the management, put it in a perspective, get the right insight, and based on that, complete our risk assessment. Once we have done the risk assessment and we have aligned this thing, then as per our audit methodology and as per the timeline which is available with us, go ahead and plan to do the field work and deliver the engagement. To do that, we may have to have a very good understanding of technology which is being used by the entity, as well as deploy some of our technologies like our analytics and all those things to do the risk assessment, as well as to complete the audit with a better assurance. We also need to, once we've done that as a planning process, we need to allocate the right set of resources. For instance, if they are engaged, there are certain controls which are automated controls in SAP. We need to have an expert, SAP expert, who can review those things and be able to review and test it both at the configuration level as well as at the overall level, and then give an opinion on the control effectiveness or ineffectiveness. And also there is a very, very essential in this entire planning process is a regular communication. The communication with our stakeholders, communications with our various people who are the auditees whom we are going to interact, so that we are able to get the information, data, and get a perspective in a right manner. And it may happen that we would have planned in the beginning something because of the information gathered or data when you are reviewing, or due to change in the circumstances, or there could be a reason for us to change the audit plan, or modify it, add some additional test, or remove certain things where we already have got a larger comfort. So it's this audit planning of an engagement is actually a continuous process, and regular updation of this is really required so as to enable us to be efficient in our audit delivery approach. So this is something which is there kept as a requirement in the standard, and it talks about having a proper mechanism of planning process, and making sure that this plan is reviewed and approved by the chief internal auditor or engagement partners, having a good understanding of the business, specifically to understand the overall environment. We have an interaction with the process owners, and follow a risk-based planning approach, wherein based on the risk and focusing on what is critical, and based on that only putting our efforts in doing the audit. The entire thing should be as per the audit methodology, which should be documented, and then certain elements of this internal audit engagement should be communicated with the stakeholders, because we have to with the auditee, because we have to get the information from them, we have to get the commitment of timelines, and we have to make sure that the entire process moves on smoothly. And most importantly, we have to look at the usage of technology. We have to make sure that the right set of people are involved, and it should be continuously monitored. And if there is any change which is required to the same should be done. Obviously, we should keep the chief internal auditor or the key stakeholders who have been involved in this planning process informed, and whatever, if we are changing anything, that the reason of the change should also be documented. By the way, these standards are required are actually the standards which are required to be followed in a effective manner, because they help in they are actually the minimum requirements, and they help an organization to achieve the real benefits of the audit. The entire, like any other planning process, there are 3 steps in doing that activity of planning. First, you need to gather knowledge, you need to gather information, you need to gather details and of the entire because if you are, for instance, planning to do an IT general control review, you need to know why we are doing that review, what is the objective of that review, and then you must understand what is the application which is being used by this thing, who are the process owner, which all modules have been implemented, why have this, what has been the previous audit finding, what has been the recommendations which have come from any regulatory audits or anything which has happened in past, what has been the feedback or inputs of the statutory auditors. All those information, they form a very, very important input, so as to enable us to do the analysis and follow the step of making sure that we put right set of test procedures and controls to be tested. And based on that, we should prepare our internal audit plan, which should have a clear identification of the controls, which should have a clear identification of when it is to be tested, what their document, what information we will be requiring for this type of thing, who will be the person who is going to provide this type of information, from which system are we going to get this type of information, and what is the time, and who is going to coordinate for it. So putting that entire process, having a clear set of agenda, identifying a clear spokes who are going to be there in day-to-day interaction, coordinating the entire activity, what will be the timelines in which the response has to be provided, or for the information and documentation which are required, what will be the efforts in terms of like doing the analysis and providing the reviews and feedback, how the response has to happen of the observation which has been noted. All these things are extremely important to be considered while we are doing the entire planning as an activity. Then we very important as element of efficient and effective planning is to understand the business and its environment. We need to look at what are the risks faced by the organization. For instance, if we are auditing an automobile company, we need to look at that what are the challenges with the industry is facing, what are the in specific challenges which which that particular entity is facing, what is the like competitor challenges which they are facing, what are the raw material supply or logistic issues they are facing. All those like things we need to understand it, because each one of them has direct or indirect reasons or indications to the audit area which may be doing. For if we are doing an IT general control review, all these things have a direct, because if we are having these types of things and if we are things are not working in an efficient and effective manner for the organization, for the industry and for that particular thing, they could be shortcuts which could have been. So we need to understand each one of them and understand what are the risks which are there. We need to also look at the legal and regulatory aspect, because when we are doing this audit, we need to know and audit from a requirement of regulatory aspect, because they are something which are to be complied by the organization mandatorily. Also, we should look at the operational challenges, and we should see how they are correlating, how the financial elements correlate or with the various business elements, what are the industry dynamics which are going on, what are the various aspects of plans in terms of organizations growth and strategy, what is the business model which they are going, what are the challenges on operational part, are they understaffed, overstaffed, what is the how is the flow of information happening within the organization, what types of processes and systems organizations are using to plan in efficient and effective manner. All these things are extremely important. Unless and until we know this, we will never be able to do an audit in an effective manner. For example, if we are doing an audit of, let us say, HR process, then in that case, we need to know why, what are the attrition rates, what are the reasons why people are joining or leaving the organization, if what are the ways in which the organization structure is being done, how the process is in the industry or overall benchmarks are there in the industry for the attracting the talents and retaining the talents, what is the challenges, operational challenges the organization faces in terms of systems not being available, or the previous audit issues or the processes gap which has been pointed out, are there any legal and regulatory risks which are there with respect to HR or non-compliances which has happened in past. So understanding each and every element of it helps us to gather an information which enables us to plan our overall engagement in a very focused way, and it helps the organization in putting the efforts both auditor and auditee in the right direction. Once we have gathered the understanding, next very important process of us is to have a discussion with the management. So this is so important. Why this is so very important is that unless and until we gather this information. It is not possible for any of the organizations to audit in an effect, get an audit done in an effective way. Just a second. Yeah. So we need to have a regular discussion with the risk owner, with the process owner, with the department head and executive management. Why this discussion is required? This discussion is required so that we can, only when we discuss, we come to know the how the process is going on. What are the details or what are the intricacies of the process? Who is going to provide what type of information? Who is the right stakeholders to interact with? What are the important and critical matters or challenges with that organization is facing? What are the various challenges which they are undergoing? And it helps us to align with the objective. Interaction with the executive management gives an overall view. The interaction with department head gives us a view of a particular domain or area which we are going to deal with for that department, which is under the scope of them. Interaction with the process owner gives us an operational views and details of the intricacies. And when we go to the risk owner, we get the complete information and we come to know that why this is important and or not, and what is the thing. In case there are certain people who are not going to be available for certain period of time due to any reason, then we can plan it or we can schedule a plan accordingly only and only if we've had our interaction with the process owner and the risk owner. Unless or until we do that, the entire planning process may not be that well, because we may not be getting an input when the person is available, what will be the information which can actually be provided, what is the timeline for which can be provided, and this, if not done, it may bring inefficiency in our entire or planning process. The next, once we have gathered the information, gathered the knowledge, had a discussion with the management, understood those entire thing, then is the time for us to sit back and look at it and complete our risk assessment. And to do that risk assessment, we have to have this perspective of what is truly important and complex and sensitive. And this perspective we can get from the stakeholder expectations. This perspective we can get from the interaction with the right set of business process owners or the executive management, from the people who we are going to audit, the auditee. Once we have done this entire thing, looked at the information and all those things, then think what could go wrong, what could we should map the process in a flow chart or in a particular way and identify where the things could go wrong. Because unless or until we identify these entire thing, we cannot do our audit planning in an efficient way and focus on the right set of areas and put our effort in the right direction. Once we have done this, we should have a follow-up discussion. We can even go for a visit to the site or conduct a review of or a survey, or we can just look at gather the information which could be available through external sources or social media, or collect some basic information from our auditee, and based on that do our analysis that whether we are in the right track or not. Once we have understood, done that thing, identified what are the key risks, then we have to prioritize and focus on the high risk area. Everybody has limited time and limited effort, and the focus obviously has to be on the bigger point. 80-20 rule should be followed in this entire thing, because it gives us a better result and efficient audit results. After doing the prioritization and putting it in, when we should look at what are the important controls which we need to test. Once we have identified that, during the whole process of risk assessment, doing this entire thing, there could be certain insights which we would have got, and if we do a planning well, at the planning stage itself, in the risk assessment, we can identify missing gaps, and if we identify those missing gaps, we should definitely control missing controls. We should highlight these as a design gaps and provide our suggestions and recommendations to the management. Now we have done the plan, we have done the understanding, we did the discussion, we did the risk assessment. The next step in our planning process is to use our methodology, and based on the audit methodology which we are going to do, cover it and do the depth analysis of how much we are going to go into in a particular domain and how we are going to deliver the engagement. Earlier, it was more of looking at the compliance part of it, doing a checklist-based audit. But with the risk-based audit approach and the value creation-based or providing value to the client, that type of approach, it's extremely important that our audit methodology is aligned as per that. We have a process-based approach and a risk-based approach of looking at the design, implementation, and operating effectiveness, which we are going to cover in the next session. And then we also need to make sure that we have an internal controls mechanism, which is there and is subject to internal control framework, is subject to review. Having an understanding of entity level control will provide a very, very effective way to enable us to put the plan in a very good manner. Because if we know that the control environment, the control culture, the organization structure is very well defined, there is an oversight mechanism, there is a process of performance measurements and all these types of things, then in that case, what may happen is that we get some level of thing and we focus on the transactional details and to the details of looking at the areas of high risk where the process could or not be focused on. So we focus on energies in those directions rather than looking at the broader entity level aspects. And typically, as in any like audit, the one of the approach could be to have a thing of putting a very good plan, based on that plan doing a field work and then reporting. So for doing that, we need to understand the stakeholder requirement, look at the risk, analyze the available information, have a brief and collect the data information, and then based on that do a field work and prepare this thing. And for each one of this like thing, as per our audit methodology, we should give a timeline. We should say who is going to do what and what is to be completed by what type of time of things, and who are the stakeholders from our auditor side as well as the auditee side who will be involved in this entire process. We also need to look at the technology, both from a perspective of having a technology which is being used by the entity, because our audit plan should focus on, because most of the business processes are nowadays automated. System plays an extremely important role in nowadays overall business operations. We should understand that technology and plan to audit that in our internal audit plan. Both from a perspective of getting a comfort on the preventive controls as well as making sure that this technology deployment usage and things are adequate. So we should understand the technology which is used, and also we should do our audit, deploy certain tools like data mining, analytics, and all those things. In fact, planning can be very, very effective if we use our audit analytics tools in extracting the information, getting an insight from the business of where the key spends are or where the key efforts are being there, because it can give us an insight on materiality, it can give us an outlier, it can give us the thing and enable us to focus our process based on those like things. So if we know, if we use this technology for getting knowledge of the processes and system and doing our risk assessment, our plan can be made much more effective and efficient, and in fact we can get a better result in the whole in audit process. So have deploying this IT technology thing, is another important thing. The entire thing has been done, but the success of the entire exercise depends on the team which we are going to deploy in doing this entire audit process. We should have, if we are doing an industry specific, for example, if we are doing a audit in a telecom sector, or we are doing an audit in the insurance sector, which are very, very regulated sectors, which have their own ways of working and all, we should make sure that we have the team having that skill set to deal with that type of sector, specifically in these regulated sectors. But nonetheless, having the industry expert, having the person having knowledge of those things makes the entire audit much more better. So we should look at the team which is available with us, the skill set which is available with us, and also the audit which plan which we have to execute. If there are any missing links between the thing, we should plan to it. We should get a seek and help of an expert and get those type of people so as to deliver the audit engagement result. Map the skill set, knowledge, and experience to the controls which we are going to do an audit. For instance, if it is a regular physical verification or a fixed asset thing, the skill set may not be that much required, and probably, like, since it's a physical verification, it can easily be done by a junior staff. But if it is something which is requiring a review of the construction thing, you may require a skill set of an expert who could be as like civil engineer, surveyor, valuers, and all those types of people may be required. If we are looking at systems which is on SAP system, we may be requiring an expert of SAP who can understand the controls and audit those types of thing. If we are auditing in a domain which is requiring a specific knowledge of a particular industry, then we have to have that person in the team and allocate that work to that team member. It may not be that for the whole engagement you may be requiring that thing, but for those specific controls, for those specific risks, for those specific domain, the mapping needs to be done and the right set of person needs to be assigned so as to get this thing. And also we need to get the time allocation both for the internal stakeholders of the management as well as our auditor, that when it will be done, who will be providing what information, what are the timelines, by what time we should be going and getting this types of thing. All those things need to be put in the plan, and this plan needs to be communicated. It, because it will get a commitment from the stakeholders, it will enable them to provide the entire thing. And this whole process of things needs to be documented and signed off by the internal audit head or the person who is managing the entire internal audit, because it is essential for the success of the entire engagement. We should put like what all information we collected, what was the documentation we did, what was the data which we gathered, what were the discussions and meetings and minutes of things we had, based on which we put our analysis, how did we do the risk assessment. Then we should also have a summary of who all are available and matching of the skill set. And based on that, detailed audit plan with an objective should be there. And this final plan should be approved by the chief internal auditor and communicated to the right stakeholders. So I think that's all from my side. Open for any questions if there are any.
I will check for options. If any of the participants have questions, then please questions in the question and answer box. Uh, any of the participants questions, then please post in the question answer box, because Yukti ma'am will be leave after 5 to 10.
Yeah, so there is one question. Are risk analysis and resource allocation interlinked? Absolutely, yes. So, based on the analysis which we have done and based on the risk assessment and the areas which we have identified or the test procedures which we have identified, accordingly, we have to put the right set of resource or right set of person or an expert to do the testing of those types of controls. So, definitely, they are interlinked. Are there any other questions? So looks like we don't have any other question. So I would like to thank the Faridabad branch for organizing this and Internal Audit Standard Board for inviting me to deliver my knowledge on this specific topic on SIA 310. Thank you very much.
So, Hamilji, your voice is not coming, sir. We have another speaker, sir. We have another speaker, संजीव जी. हाँ हाँ, विजय जी की आवाज नहीं आ रही. ठीक है.
Hello. Oh, am I audible? Hello.
Yeah, audible. Please commence.
Okay. Okay. Uh, Sorry for the interruption. Just a moment. I would like to thank Kirti Arora ma'am for their important uh, delivery on the standards on internal audit 310 planning the internal audit assignment. For our session, for further deliberation, we have with us the very eminent speaker on the internal audit standard 120 internal controls. We have with us CS Sanjeev Sood sir. So I would like to introduce his file. CS Sanjeev Sood sir is a Chief Audit Executive of Max Life Insurance Company Limited. And he is a finance professional with more than 25 years of experience in both internal audit as well as in the finance function. He's a chartered accountant, certified internal audit, certified information system editor, and CE also. He has also completed executive program in the business management from the IIM Calcutta. He is present working with Max Life Insurance, Vice President Internal Assurance and Chief Executive since April 2010. And prior to that, he has a long stint of with Bharti Airtel Limited with around 12 years. During his professional career, he with different leaders across many functions of the internal audit. Areas of specialization are deployed internal audit and risk management framework, IT and forensic and fraud prevention and controls. So I would like to welcome Sanjeev Sood sir on behalf of Internal Audit and Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants. So please, sir, please start and welcome you in today's VCM on behalf of Institute of Chartered Accountants Internal Audit Standard Board.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, CA Vijay Swami ji, Arun and Yukti. Glad to be, taking a session on something which is very close to me as a professional. More so because I was actually when these standards were set across a small committee that was formed. I was quite actively participating in those deliberations as well. So from that standpoint, it was quite helpful for me to kind of take a session on internal controls. At the outset, let me just thank the Internal Audit Standard Board for inviting me, and of course, Faridabad branch for holding this session. These educatory sessions and knowledge-driven sessions through digital mode definitely helps the pass on the information and knowledge that we share from our experiences as well as get a different point of view. Yukti did talk about a very, very important standard on planning, and she did mention about internal controls. And internal controls is a much broader standard, and it's actually cover quite a lot of aspect around internal audits as well. So I'll quickly share my screen and put across the slides that I intend to talk about, and share some of those insights with you on the internal controls framework. My slides are visible, right? Let me just do the slideshow. Okay, so let me just kind of set the context before I jump into the standards on SI 120, which is more specifically and broadly talk about the internal control aspect. I think what has changed in the internal audit specifically, and why this the importance was felt by the institute to build on these standards that has been now becoming a very, very important aspect of this is, first, of course, uh, the Companies Act when it came in 2013, and of course it took some time to really get entrenched into what all it entails and why some of these expectations from the shareholders has been ever increasing. So I think that was again one aspect that that kind of framed what we need to kind of build in. So that is another element. Then of course, from a regulation standpoint, we do have now industry specific regulators. So clearly that is also coming into play where, one needs to look at it from a standpoint that how the regulator is viewing it. I work in an insurance sector, which is again highly regulated. Similarly, you have industry regulators as well as overall regulators. So that I think is also was a very, very important frame. So, I'll talk about some of those, and you'll see one of the requirements of that the companies that clearly laid down, and which was followed up, of course, with the rules that set across. You'll see responsibilities, and this section, this standard on internal audit also talks about the definition, of course, the responsibility of the board and the management, and of course the responsibility of internal audit. So I think before we actually jump on to the responsibility, it's also important to understand from a regulatory standpoint, what are the various components of the governance, corporate governance mechanism which are there, and what all that they are responsibilities. And I'll delve deeper into some of those aspects as I talk more about the content of the standards that has been laid down on internal control. So if you look at from an overall governance standpoint, board of directors, clearly, there is a requirement of the Companies Act to have the director responsibility that directors had to lay down internal financial controls to be followed. I think that is very, very important one, which that's why it has changed the way internal controls is being viewed, followed by the company. I think that's the first one. And the follow-up one also, which is there, that the such financial controls, internal financial controls are adequate actually, and were reporting effectively when you do an audit there. So specifically for listed companies, this requirement is very, very clearly spelled out. From a rule standpoint, I think there is also a mention of adequacy of internal financial controls with reference to financial statement that is required for all companies as well. So both for listed, of course, there is slightly more stringent norm, but of course, overall across companies, I think that is the adequacy of financial controls, internal financial controls is kind of being looked at and talked about. From an audit committee standpoint, once you have the board, then of course, the board has to rely on various subcommittees that has being made basis the overall board. So audit committee has been given the responsibility to evaluate internal financial control as well as the risk management system. So you clearly have a view that has to be the oversight has to be kept at an audit committee level on both internal financial controls as well as the risk management practices systems that is being discussed. Audit committee is also authorized to call, discuss comments of the auditors, understand what are the views of auditors, coverage of scope of audit, observations. So some of those aspects are also there. And also audit committee can discuss with both internal and statutory auditors and the management of the company in terms of how internal controls are really functioning. So clearly, from a governance standpoint, audit committee is the oversight body, which of course report to the board in terms of the outcome. But from a regular periodic review standpoint, audit committee has a very, very important role to play, and that's being defined in section 177 there. From a statutory auditor standpoint, clearly they are now have to mandatorily report on whether the company has adequate internal financial control system, and they are. It's not only that they are there, but they are also operating, effectively in that manner during the period of the review. So that again is an onus that's being put across statutory auditors there. Independent directors, Schedule 4 talked about, they have to satisfy themselves on the integrity of financial information, and that financial controls and as well as the risk management is robust and defensible. I think these are very, very important and critical words, and each word of the is, these words had been specifically kept with the intent in mind, so that there is a clear responsibility being defined by the independent directors, that they have to be actively play a role, and they have to satisfy themselves, and one can only satisfy oneself once get that the internal controls as demonstrated and confirmed by the statutory auditors, internal auditors, management, they are well documented, they are working effectively. So they get to hear and satisfy themselves by talking and getting a report from the statutory auditors, understanding and reviewing the work that is being done by internal auditor, and of course asking management to provide a view on how internal controls are actually deployed. So very, very important aspects, and that's what the Companies Act, once that got deployed, and of course it took some time for the companies to really understand it. I must admit that in the beginning it was more just filling the form and doing that, but as we are evolved much, I've at least in the last 4 5 years I've seen a very, very clear focus coming in from the boards and the audit committee, and that's why we have seen even the institute actively coming up with these standards in the last 4 5 years. So in the last 5 years, definitely this has picked up steam, and then as we move ahead, we are getting more. Each of the companies, each of the boards are much more becoming active and playing a very important role on questioning and trying to understand and get a view from all the stakeholders on the importance of internal control. So I thought this is a good way of kind of building that in. I think there are a few relevant which I will talk about. Of course, one with respect to the listed companies. From an internal audit standpoint, there is a clear requirement to appoint internal auditors. Internal auditors appointment is also being done through a resolution by the board. So clearly, the importance of internal audit after this, the requirement of these companies rules as well as Companies Act has clearly gone up a notch, and of course with the responsibility also has got enhanced in terms of providing an independent view to the to the audit committee as well as to the board on the operational effectiveness and the efficiency of the internal control. So that aspect is there specifically for every listed company. For unlisted company also there are that have been defined with some paid up capital requirement, income around. Some of those criteria have all been put in the slide, so I don't want to read through the slide, but clearly for listed companies, the appointment of internal auditor has been very, very clearly stated. For even unlisted companies, there are rules where we again have to appoint director, and of course for private companies also there are thresholds being defined, which actually has to quite a lot extent have changed the way internal audit is being viewed within the organization as well as to the board. It's like getting a seat on the table, where importance of internal audit is being looked at a very, very different with a different frame, and questions are of course also being asked with that frame to so that one is covering the various aspects of internal control, specifically around financial reporting. A framework governing the internal audit. Of course, this is a more a generic slide. Some of the standard that is being laid down provide a overall framework for performing and promoting broad range of internal audit activities. Which actually establishes the basis of evaluation of the internal audit performance. So the overall objective here is to ensure that the consistent application of basic principles of internal control best practices, are being deployed. So if you look at the overall framework, it talks about the basic principle around the internal audit definition, the key concepts that are being used, guidance that one get, and of course standards also comes into play from a code of ethics standpoint, that when we are doing some of the internal audit activities, when we are carrying internal audit activities, we do have to adhere to the standard that has been laid down. And you did talk about one of the standards on planning, and of course what I am talking about is more on internal control. So this is just a framework that has actually been set across. which has definition, code of ethics, and basic principles. Definition clearly, is being laid down there, which about internal audit, which provide an independent assurance on the effectiveness of internal controls. The reason why I'm picking it up because internal controls, you'll find a common thread, common theme which is coming across, and of course, risk management processes is also part of it to enhance governance and achieve the organizational objectives. So you'll see this definition that has been laid down under the umbrella of internal audit standards is around internal audit is to the keywords here is independent assurance, effectiveness of internal control. So those are the two key ones that one needs to look at it, the frame, and that's why when I shared that the regulation now requires appointment of internal auditor, is one of a very specific requirement, and that's where the independence has to play a very important role because the appointment is not by the management but by the board or the audit committee, and that's why the independence where the internal audit team derives the independence from. And of course, one of the key asks that has been set across from the internal audit is provide assurance on the effectiveness of internal control, which again, is an important responsibility that is being laid down in the standard of internal audit, which is 120 on internal control. So I'll talk more about it. Code of ethics is also an important framework under the overall theme. Every internal audit is bound by a written code of ethics, which is again defined within the organization or the institution. In our case, being chartered accountants, we have to abide by the code of ethics by the ICAI, which actually primarily the objective here is that the standards are applied ethically, with integrity and sincerity. I think that's an important fundamental value or the part of the framework foundation, I would say, and this is primarily to drive that it is not being done on an ad hoc manner without applying mind. Actually, it has to be done in spirit as well as form. So clearly, that is an important foundation, I would say, to really drive the real value. Basic principles, are some of the core principles that have been set across fundamental to the function of the internal audit, which are critical to achieve the desired objectives set out in the definition of internal audit. I think one of the key elements when you look at the definition is that enhancing governance and achieving organizational objectives. So those two are very, very important frame, which has been captured as part of the overall process. And that's where it's not only providing assurance, enhanced governance, but also supporting the organization achieve its objectives. I think that's a very, very important frame that has been added. Earlier, it was only said that internal auditors are being looked at more as a, providing a view, just a view and assurance, nothing to do with organizational objectives. But I think clearly one cannot do unless one is very clear about the objectives of the organization, and Yukti did talk about, why it is very important that one, as internal auditors, we understand the business acumen, because without that, you will not be able to really support or provide a value add, for the organization to move ahead. So that's the context, slightly longer, but I thought that was important, before we jump into the context of 120, which is specifically on internal controls. Clearly, there are three elements again being defined. Objective is, to, as I mentioned, clearly clarify the responsibility of management and auditors over internal controls. And one needs to look at it how the requirements need to be met. Again, there are interpretations that companies take, but the intent of 120 here is to provide a broader view and also set up some boundary conditions and lay down a standard around what all that need to be covered. And I'll talk more about it in the subsequent slides. Provide a common terminology to internal audit. That's one of the objective. The purpose, is also to kind of develop a common terminology. You'll hear terminologies around entity level control, which we talked about. That is one of the elements. So when one looks at internal control over financial reporting and what internal controls entails, you will find process controls, operational controls. ITGC is another very, very big important element now that is being added as organizations are moving toward digital frame. And you will see more and more of those will get added, as the transition is happening from a manual controls to more digital controls, and how that's being built in. The purpose of standard of SIA 120 is also to define internal controls, and that's where some of those which I talked about will get covered. Responsibilities of management and auditors with respect to internal controls, again a very, very important aspect, subject that we touched upon. I remember there were a lot of discussion, debates happening in terms of who should own this, whether management, whether statutory auditor, whether internal auditor, when we were writing these standards. And clearly, the consensus came in that you have to have very clear responsibilities being defined, that who should do what. As a first line of defense, it is the responsibility of the management to lay down the processes. As a second line of defense, there has to be a mechanism to test those. As a third line of defense, internal auditor role is to kind of review as part of the audit plan and then provide a independent view. And of course, the last come in aspect here is statutory auditors, which has to again provide their own independent view. So there are multiple layers, and that's got covered as part of the overall standard on internal controls. It also specifies certain requirements which need to be met in able to provide independent assurance. So there are, clearly being defined as part of what needs to be done to really put that across. From a very simple and basic definition on internal controls, that is being defined is, internal controls are nothing but, it's essentially a risk mitigation steps taken to strengthen the organization. And you'll find multiple ways that you put across internal control. It is, as I said, is a very, very broad area. One needs to look at it to strengthen the organization system and processes. I think one of the important element is that by deploying those internal controls, whether it's manual, automated, whether it is driven by a system, or it is driven by by a transaction which is a manual transaction. So one needs to clearly look at it, that how the risk is being mitigated. I think that is a very, very important subject, or important element of this whole definition, that how the internal controls which is being put across for that process, for that for that function, is supporting and mitigating the risk which is emanating from that activities. Yeah, sorry about, I just dropped off. I'll just come back again. Yeah. Okay, so I was more talking about definition of internal controls here, and then let me just move on and touch upon a very very important aspect of regulatory framework on, or what we call it an ICFR, and then I'll have this being talked about in another slide as well, important one, which clearly defined the regulatory requirement and the responsibility of the various elements of governance, I would say, starting from the board, of course, then auditors, audit committee, and then the independent actor. I did touch upon it. So you'll see it's in a very succinct manner, in a tabulated manner. We are trying to define it, the requirement for listed companies as well as unlisted companies. Director responsibility statement, clearly has been laid down, is to have directors to have a laid down, internal financial control, or internal control over financial reporting. So you'll see those two terms being used on both the manner. Of course, Rule 8.5 clearly said that there has to be an adequacy on internal financial control with reference to the financial statement. I think that is an important element. Auditors, as I shared earlier, needs to clearly state and provide a view over the adequacy of the internal financial control over financial reporting when they are really operating effectively. So some of those elements, did clearly come in from various regulatory requirements, and of course, finally, independent actors, which I talked about as well earlier, they have to satisfy themselves, and they can only do so once they once the auditors, everyone is able to demonstrate that they have really been able to do it. Let me just put some more color and discuss more on the types of exposure and control. I think this is an important slide on what all internal controls entails. The first one, of course, uh, so there are 5 elements here, and what I've tried to do is what are the key risks that are there, listed down, and then of course what could be the various controls that one can look at. So one has to look at it with the frame of the type of exposure which is there, and then the controls which kind of mitigate the risk of exposure uh, being higher than what the limits that has been defined. The first one, of course, is the entity level. Entity level controls are controls uh, which are put across and deployed, at an entity level first of all, and they are of a much higher order. So, give you an example of any board approved policy is an entity level control, whether it's working effectively or not. Having a very clear process of minuting the board meetings from a governance standpoint is again a very very important entity level control. So whether the committee meeting deliberations are being minuted well in time, as well as in a proper manner, I think that's an example of entity level control. Any policy which is executed, which is a board approved policy executed, is an entity level control. I mean, example could be a whistleblower policy which is being approved, and how they are being kind of deployed on the ground, is an example of entity level control. And there are many. So generally, I would say at least 40 to 50 entity level controls generically, one can really find out in a fairly medium to large scale organization. Second one is, of course, the financial exposure, and that's where this frame come in, where one needs to look at it. One needs to look at it with the frame that what are the internal controls which are being deployed over financial reporting. I think this is a very specific ask, basically about financial reporting will include multiple aspects of revenue reporting to expense reporting, P&L. It covers the various gamut of wherever you will have a financial risk or financial exposure. Internal controls around those financial risk and financial exposure specifically around which have an impact on the reporting cycle comes under this frame. Process exposure is more a more a control where for any specific business process, there is a risk of non-conformance, or there is a risk of process adherence not happening. That comes under the process level control. Operational exposure is again a very operational exposure could be again with respect to the business. With respect to a business, so if you are looking at a manufacturing organization, an operational risk could be a plant, a machinery not working, which is very critical. As a result of that, the entire production shop getting impacted. It could be an operational exposure, operational risk, and what control that has been deployed so that that exposure is not in the critical path. Because if you are in the critical path, then it will have a impact on the entire life cycle of product development as well as manufacturing of that goods and services. So I think that's where very important to understand and identify clearly, put across operational risks. And finally, you'll find system and access exposure coming into play, which is more with respect to the ITGC. With now systems getting more digitized, I think that plays a very important role. System access exposure is a is a very important risk that needs to be mitigated through deployment and testing of ITGC. So all those 4-5 elements that is being put across in the slide overall entails and covers the view on internal control. So I think all of them are all of them is a theme in itself. So every theme that you look at, whether it's entity level internal control or financial reporting, process level controls, operational controls, and ITGC. So you'll find each of them play a very important role in overall defining the internal control framework for the organization. I think that's the way to look at it. And when one looks at internal control as an internal auditor, you have to cover as part of your internal audit plan some elements of all of these, as part of your testing, as part of your creating a risk control matrices, deploying some of those, how this can be put across. So I think important to really understand the overall framework on internal controls. Another example, another way of putting across these controls is through this element of types of control, and that's where again the 5 elements that being put across. Let me just begin from the bottom right, which is the manual control, which has been there for centuries, where any control where you you have to look at it. Somebody has to look at it with a pair of eyes. It's not defined. It is defined, but somebody has to look at it. Another pair of eyes has to look at it. Is called a manual control. Then you also have classify some of the control into a detective and preventive control. So detective control, the example could be when you're doing a bank reconciliation statement, bank reconciliation, you'll find some errors either while recording in the books of accounts or in the statement. So that is a detective control. So bank reconciliation statement is a detective control. Whereas preventive control would be that wherever you are able to prevent the error from happening, right? So somebody is proactively identifying and looking at that you're not allowed to issue a purchase order till the time there is a combat that has already been given, and there is a from a procurement standpoint, and then you are issuing a purchase order only after one has followed through the combat process, and there is an evaluation of vendor which is done. So that is an example of a preventive control. Automated control would be more in the frame where the system doesn't allow you to move further till such time that all the documents have been done. So, for example, if you take an example of any example of, say, opening of a bank account, the system won't allow you to open a bank account till the time all the KYC documents are there. So that becomes an automated control. Till the time all the processes, or the other way around could be when there is a system check, which when you're doing a data entry and there are for example a state, when you enter Delhi and then you enter some other pin code, the system won't allow you to move further because there is a control built in that the pin codes has to assign with the state. So if you put instead of 11 starting from 11, you put 22, which is some other state pin code, it won't accept it. So that is an example of automated control. Fraud control is also again can be both manual, automated. It is primarily with the aim of mitigating the fraud risk. I think that's another element. Another way of understanding and really building the up of mitigating the fraud risk. So again, in defining in 5 elements: so manual, detective, preventive, automated, and fraud. So when you are building that up, you'll see that what are the risks at entity level, financial, process level, operational level, system level, and then how do you have various mechanisms to really mitigate those risks, and what are the various types of control that you can build in. I think some of these actually, when one develops the overall risk control matrices, this play a very, very important role, and that's where you also, while doing the testing, will accordingly have to create a sample size. For example, for an automated control, even a one sample test would be enough, because we know if we test one sample, it will kind of you don't need to do multiple sample testing, because that will give you comfort that the system is being developed like this. If one sample passes the effectiveness, that you'll assume the system is working fine. Whereas in manual controls, you have to take a larger sample, because the possibility of errors are much higher order there, because somebody can still miss out. So that's again, more on the testing frame. So I thought this is again, these two are very, very important strides to really build that in. Some of this I've already talked about, in earlier slides, but just to give you a brief here on responsibilities area which I've not touched upon, is a bullet number 4 actually, which is for listed companies, as per the SEBI, and the listing obligation and disclosure requirement, it mandates the compliance certificates and by CEO and CFO. Clearly, the responsibility on the management is there, that they accept the responsibility for establishing and maintaining internal controls for financial reporting. And also, both the CEO and the CFO has to confirm that they have adequate system and controls. They have evaluated effectiveness of internal control system of the listed entity pertaining to financial reporting, and they have disclosed to the auditors as well as the audit committee any deficiencies that they have noted in design or operation of such internal control. So clearly, the first responsibility lies with the management, which is the CEO and CFO, that they have to declare. If they know anything, it is obligatory on their part to declare that, to say that this is how that has been built in. And of course, once they do that, then of course they know there has to be a testing of those internal controls. Of course, they do get assurance from either finance team, where the testing is done through second line, or the internal audit team, which also looks at some of those. And finally, statutory auditors are also needs to look at it on a regular basis, whether the company has adequate internal control. In fact, it has to be a part of their report, statutory audit report as well. When they put that out across, for the company. So if you look at in conclusion, the overall responsibility for designing, assessing the adequacy, implementing and maintaining the operating effectiveness of internal control rests with the board of directors and the management. Of course, boards can't do it on their own, so they have to rely on management, internal auditors, statutory auditors, and then of course the audit committee has to satisfy themselves that indeed internal controls over financial reporting are working adequately, and there is a clear oversight being put across by the management as well as the statutory auditors as they report back. So very important element on responsibility of board, specifically around internal controls. The another important one is on the internal auditor. I think a lot of and we did deliberated in terms of how does internal auditors come into play, and what role clearly has to played by the internal auditor. So one, of course, as being put across, and it's there in the standard as well, the internal auditor is expected to include internal control as part of the key scope and approach. So when internal auditor defines or puts up the plan, internal controls for that process has to be at the forefront. It can't be that while doing the audit you miss out on the internal control. So I think is of paramount importance. I think the other element, of course, is when internal auditor does the testing and all as per the scope and approach, they do try and cover as much as possible around internal controls. The internal auditor also is required to ensure that the entity has, really it's end to end. It's not only that you test the control, you look at the documentation that they are designed, implemented, and maintained. In a very effectively and also working in a very efficient manner. I think that is another important element, and that's where when the internal audit team defines, does the planning, and Yukti did talk about the planning aspect of it. The procedure, shall be sufficient to allow the internal audit to check the design and implementation. So that is again the onus being put on the internal audit team as when they develop their risk control matrices, when they do the testing plan, when they do complete the sample testing aspect as such. They need to clearly, as internal audit team, need to clearly pay very high importance on this aspect of testing as well. The other element around is that before you actually jump on to the testing of internal controls, there has to be a very important element of risk assessment exercise that has to be taken, and which I'll not touch upon it because Yukti has already talked about the importance of risk assessment as part of the overall planning, because that is the fundamental element before we really drive that, and that's why there is a reference around that aspect as well. The other important element is providing an independent opinion, which is that's why because internal auditors are required to be appointed by the board, they have to maintain their independence, and that's why independent opinion around again effectiveness and operational effectiveness of that, specifically with regard to a clear understanding on internal control framework, also supports the audit committee in their, in order to complete their responsibility with respect to the operations of internal control which are working effectively. So internal audit committee actually depends on the internal audit team, besides the statutory auditors as well, to get a view and to satisfy themselves. I think that's the word that's being mentioned in the act, which says that the audit committee has to satisfy themselves. So they do that by getting a view from internal audit as well as statutory auditor. And while building that in, I think from a management level, again different practices are being followed, but very important is to have a CSA approach. When I say CSA, it is control self-assessment by the respective owners to confirm that indeed the internal controls for their respective patches are working effectively. Basis that, the CEO and the CFO does the certification, and of course testing being done by the internal auditors, as part of the overall internal audit plan. And finally, in specifically when situations where statutory auditor is expected to rely on the work of internal auditor, you have to refer to another standard of SIA 610, specifically around
I think the connection dropped again, so I would like to request all to be with us. So after 2 3 minutes, it will continue. Please wait 2 or 3 minutes. I request all to stay with us.
Yeah. So I just conclude, maybe in last slide, and then I'll conclude. So the last one that I am kind of talking about was more around how the statutory auditors, in case they have to rely, the internal auditor has to kind of really play important role to really build that in, and then have a very clear view and documentation around building that aspect of it as well. So primarily, I think just to summarize and conclude, this overall standard on internal controls, I would say, is one of the foundation of around the internal audit work as it grows around. Because one, of course, has defined the clear responsibility of the overall governance framework, which is the board, the audit committee, the internal auditor. I think that is very clearly articulated. It also defines the internal control as an element, because that's what the foundation, I would say, to really the internal audit work that is being done. So with that, I think I'll pause here. It's an interesting discussion. Of course, people can have a different point of view. If you look at just do a Google, you'll find different definition of internal controls. But what we have done in the institute, and as I said, I was part of the deliberations there. We tried to make it quite simple as possible and try to build in the aspect of practicality around that. So with that, Vijayji, I'll hand it over to you. Happy to take on questions. Maybe I've taken a
Thank
bit
you,
of
sir.
longer time. Apologies of a couple of times I have to the internet.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for this important topic on internal controls, standards on internal audit and controls. So I check if there is any questions. So there is one question, sir. There is a question. In a practical scenario, what would be our course when management does not provide any opportunity for discussion?
Hmm. Well, I think one has to, there are two ways to look at it. In case they don't provide an opportunity for discussion, the internal auditors are obligated actually to report the facts to the audit committee at least. Again, one has to look at it and see the reason why they are not responding, why the process owners are not responding. First of all, there has to be an escalation mechanism being defined within the organization. So in case the person responsible owner is not responding, as I mentioned, the CEO and the CFO has to report and confirm that the internal controls are working effectively. So the first escalation point has to be the CFO, and if the CFO is not also responding, the CEO, and then of course I'm sure things will move. And in case even there you are not getting a response, it has to be then reported back to the audit committee, because ultimately internal auditors are appointed by the audit committee, as per the regulation now. So they have that line of escalation mechanism. But of course, one has to try and understand the reason why the response is not coming. It could be because of some other business issues. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it depends on case to case. But one has to really identify why is it not coming? What is it that as an internal auditor I have not understood the business? I am raising some issue which is not even relevant to them. So first just make sure that whatever issue that you're highlighting is relevant to the business, and it does make sense for them to look at it. It could be also, I'm just thinking aloud to say that if you raise an issue which is of no importance to them, you need to really understand and maybe introspect, the way testing has been done, or the way one is interpreting the internal controls, or are there any compensating controls to mitigate that risk?
Sir, there is a question, one more question. Uh, can we report any fraud as an internal auditor?
Again, if you identify that fraud, this is your internal audit work. You have to kind of put it across in your report. I think what generally happens is that it's very hard to really conclude fraud through the internal audit. So what you identify and you report is a outage or an error or or a non-conformance to the process, and then you make a recommendation that this transaction that we have observed is not in line with the laid down process, and therefore needs to be investigated further, and then you hand it over. So if you are as an internal auditor also, investigation then has to be done separately, but in your report you can always capture that as an outage with an action plan that subsequently some investigation has to happen to conclude whether it's a fraud or not.
There is one more question. While making frame for internal audit, what kind of code of ethics to be followed?
So one, of course, is is there, which is also part of the institute code of ethics. As members of the institute, we are bound by that. So I think that's one frame. The other frame is the organization that you're working with. Most of the organizations have their own business code of conduct policy. So that also needs to be adhered to. So two frames, I would say. One, of course, is your professional frame of the institute, the code that is being laid down by the institute, and the second frame is the organization that you're working for. Are there any, if there is any business code of conduct being policy being there, you have to follow that.
One more question, sir. How to detect fraud committed even so many audits, internal control and other governance framework? After so many audits, internal controls and other governance, how to detect fraud committed?
Yeah, so it's a very it's not a one. There's no one answer to it. I think fraud, when you look at the studies around fraud, you'll find that the maximum, the one of the how that fraud is being detected is the topmost metric would be a whistleblower, some tip off coming in. Of course, internal auditors also at times identify or come across some suspicious transactions. I would not say that internal auditors will be able to identify and fraud per se as such, but of course, as part of the internal audit work, they can identify those suspicious transactions which one has to look at and investigate. But as per the study and as per the research done by one of the US institute, ACFE, which is Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, whistleblower is one of the very, very important policy that one should have, which actually helps you to identify and also build awareness around fraud risks.
Okay, sir. There is, I think, no more question. So I would like to conclude it here. So I would thank all the speakers, Yukti ma'am, Sanjeev sir, and I would like to thank all the participants who have joined in a huge number in this VCM. I would like to thank on behalf of Internal Audit Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and on behalf of Faridabad branch of ICAI. So I thank you all for joining us today, and thank you very much for this virtual CP meeting on the audit on behalf of Internal Audit Standard Board of Institute of Accountants of India. Thank you all for participating and joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.